We're back with another episode of the Inspiring Women in CX podcast, a series dedicated to real talk conversations between women in customer experience and technology. For Series 8, we're raising the bar, pushing boundaries, sparking bold ideas, and challenging the CX status quo. Expect fresh perspectives, fearless discussions, and a celebration of women driving change in our industry. I'll be your host, Claire Muscat, and in today's episode, I'll be talking to a seriously inspiring lady from the UK about solo motherhood, IVF, and how Agile has shaped her journey through it all. A Scrum Master and Agile capability lead with a wealth of experience guiding tech teams across retail, FMCG, oil and gas and media, she's goal-oriented, passionate about human-centred outcomes, and known for connecting people to solve problems and drive progress creatively. Outside of work, she's a classically trained actor and Zumba instructor, bringing energy, empathy, and authenticity to everything she does. Allow me to introduce you to today's inspiring guest, Freya Finnerty. Hi, Freya.
Hey, Claire.
Welcome to the Inspiring Women in CX podcast. Wonderful to have you here.
You know, it's great to be here. It's great to be here.
Yeah, finally. And thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in to listen or watch wherever you are. So I think this conversation probably needs a little bit of context. And that is that Freya and I have known each other for a very long time because we originally worked together at Sainsbury's. However, Freya and I reconnected when, if any of you who follow me on social media, remember when I posted about my decision on Mother's Day was the post to become a solo mother by choice. And I opened up about the fact that I was about to embark upon my own IVF journey. And Freya very kindly reached out in the DMs. And I was so overwhelmed by how many people reached out to me at that time with their own experiences, their own different stages of the journeys that they've been on, people thinking about it, people who'd successfully conceived, people who had tried and failed. And in that post I said, I think it's really important that we remove the stigma around IVF and solo motherhood, because it was so apparent to me that people didn't comment about that. They had to come to the DMs to try to talk about it. So I said at the time, we need to make a podcast. And when Freya reached out to me, it meant that we had a conversation. Freya told me about her previous journey of doing the first stage, and Freya then supported me whilst I did the treatment, which is a lot of medication, a lot of scans, and having your eggs retrieved. And mine was class is a very successful round that I had at the age of 43. 30 follicles that produced 20 eggs that became 15 embryos. And I was very, very excited at that. Wow, amazing what my body can do at 43. But then once they went to PGTA testing, which is genetic testing to make sure all the DNA is in the right place, I only ended up with one embryo that's actually genetically viable. And that embryo is now sitting in a freezer. But Freya took the next step in her journey, which was to get pregnant. And then I supported you behind the scenes in your journey to now having beautiful baby Fox. So I suppose that's the kind of setup for this conversation. And I think, we've become firm friends since. Freya's joined the Women in CX community as well. And being able to kind of cross these two tracks, I suppose, of Agile CX, or 3 tracks, and IVF and solo motherhood. I hope we can be really helpful to anyone out there who's considering any of those things within their own personal journeys. So if we think about the beginning, I suppose, for you, Freya, would you like to share a little bit more about your decision to pursue solo or motherhood through IVF, but also kind of your career journey and kind of how these two things have intertwined together? So maybe start with career, and then we can talk about decision to go for it with IVF, because your story is quite different to mine.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I'll start with the career. And I guess probably like my journey to motherhood, my career has been quite eventful. And I suppose even my transition to work into technology hasn't been conventional either. I started out my career working as a designer for a global marketing insights company called Added Value. And I was 16 at the time, and I really loved art and drama. And my art teacher got me some work experience there over the summer. And I joined as an assistant in their design team, and it was really cool. I got to work with some awesome brands. And anyway, I used to work there during my school holidays, and then they offered me a full-time job as a mood board designer. So I was basically, it's quite cool, creating concept boards, or I was going out shopping and creating like themed rooms to like bring the look and feel of a brand to life. So it was a great place to work. If you love shopping, what a great job. But I actually hate shopping, as you know. But
this sounds like the perfect job for me, to be honest. Yeah. I know shopping's not your bag.
Yeah, no, I think I had enough of shopping then. But I still had this theatre bug niggling at me, and so the stage was calling. So I actually left the job after a year, and I went to drama school. So there was my other kind of sort of first big shift. And I suppose this was kind of pivotal for me, because I sort of decided what I do at that point is keep one foot in the world of work and one in the world of acting. If you know anyone who's done acting, it's pretty unpredictable. And I suppose at that time, I hadn't really thought about being a mum. I was quite young, and I was sort of really pursuing, I really wanted to do acting. That was my thing. But I was lucky enough to land a job working in customer experience for Ubisoft, who's a computer games publisher. And again, it was a bit of a sort of mix of a job. I was sort of responding to customer letters, and I was managing our social pages, which I think around 2002, it's quite limited.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy to think that you'd have one person, managing these now. And the other part of my role was arranging large scale tours of these gaming buses and taking them to music festivals. And I remember going around Reading Festival and having to, and then when I got back to the office, I had to manually enter all the data that we captured on these sort of cards, and it was never ending. But I suppose, again, it was just a sort of, times were really different then. And at this point, I'd had a passion for design. I was sort of getting into creating experiences, in the theatre, but also, I suppose, for customers and digital. So I moved into PR, and I went to work for Warner Brothers, promoting a video game called Lego Batman, which was super fun. So again, it's a bit like this, is that a bit of random journey.
Squiggly.
But again, behind all of this was me trying to break into acting. And I was lucky enough to go to Russia and work with the Moscow Arts Theatre, the Royal Shakespeare Company. But I was also, I was attending quite a lot of auditions in the week as well. So at this point, I was very used to working with change, embracing unpredictable, situations and a lot of rejection. So this set me up perfectly for working in tech at Sainsbury's, where we met, Claire. And I started out in the DX team, the digital experience team, and I kind of got headhunted for this role. I didn't really know what it was, but they were setting up a new team, and they wanted an assistant to support the director. But I had heard that at Sainsbury's they had the role of a Scrum Master, and I really liked the sound of that role. It kind of tied together what I was doing in the theatre and things like that. So I thought, I'll just give it a go, and maybe I could shadow and eventually become a Scrum Master, which I did. And I suppose at this point, I have to say that, the acting dream that I was pursuing kind of, I was kind of losing my grasp of that, a bit. And I didn't mind so much, because I was actually found a job that I really liked. And it was at this point where I was starting thinking of becoming a mum. And, I was starting to think about, things like maternity packages and family friendly policies. And it seemed like a good place to be. But unfortunately, after 8 years, that role came to an end. And, I had pursued my dream of being a mum. And so from this point onwards, all my career choices were based on, how I could become a mother. Did they offer maternity pay and support? Was the salary, high enough? Because, as you know, Claire, IVF is not cheap.
Expensive, yeah.
And did they have good family policies? And, I have to say, I did have to walk away from some really amazing jobs and some big companies, because they didn't actually meet this criteria. So I think, at that point, I was realizing that as a woman working in tech, you do have to make some big decisions, if you do want to become a mum, especially on your own. But I suppose the other part of your question, the whole solo parenting thing, I mean, that was never on my agenda. No. I suppose, to be completely transparent, I was in a long-term relationship. I was married. I had 2 stepsons, and we were together, over 13 years. And I suppose I put my thoughts of having a baby on hold, because I was, chasing the dream of acting. And I thought, one day I'd either achieve it or I'd just stop chasing. But, I was already being a mom. I was a stepmom, and, that was a wonderful experience. And, you know, as a couple, we decided that, you know, we'd wait for the boys to be a bit older and then I would try for a baby. But when that time came, we decided to separate. So, so here we are, solo parenting. So, yeah, I had to make a choice, either be bold and give it a go on my own, or, you know, just let it be. And, you know, I suppose it wasn't a decision that I took, you know, lightly. It was a lot of soul searching. It was also during COVID, so it wasn't easy. And, you know, I think when you're, you know, at the time I was approaching 40, I was thinking, you know, do I wait and meet somebody else? You know, don't just meet someone and say, hey, you know, do we have a baby? At that age, I was already thinking about my fertility and my egg quality. So I thought, you know what, the one thing I hate is having regrets. And I knew that this is one thing I'd regret. So I just went for it. So that is sort of, long story short, how I got to this point. Rather long route round.
Yeah, wow. So much of that resonates with me. I think particularly that kind of like putting it off. So I first went to investigate my status in terms of fertility at 38. I'd been single for 8 years. I was thinking, I think I want children in the future, but was very conscious of the well-known fact, which I found out since isn't really that much of a fact, that after 35 your fertility drops off a cliff. So I remember going to the first appointment, having like the blood tests and the scans and everything, and being quite pleased that they said, oh, your AMH level, which is the hormone level that is for your egg reserve, was high for my age. And then I kept thinking, I'm going to meet somebody, so I'll wait. And at the time I was thinking that, you know, it's going to be a heterosexual relationship with a man. So like if I wanted to have a baby, if I did too much along the IVF route in terms of creating embryos, they might not want that. I can't believe I was thinking that. And then I kept going back basically every year. And I'd been told, like, because at 38 your egg quality is already kind of not so great, like I can have a good amount of them, but they might not be great quality, that egg freezing was an option. It would have to be embryos because the likelihood of the eggs surviving freezing, thawing, fertilization at an older age, you're geriatric basically after 35, was going to be a low chance. So I kept going back every year, and it was when my personal hormones did start to show that drop, that there was a definite change, that I was like, it's now or never, and I'm not going to put my life on hold and my potential choices on hold in the hope that I'm going to meet somebody else that wants to do that with me. But I really wish I'd not put it off for so long. And if I could go back and tell my younger self something. I get asked this question all the time when I do media interviews, and they think I'm going to say something about my career, but it is, honestly, girls, freeze your eggs as soon as you can, because like, the way that your career might take off, I know like the reason I hadn't pursued any of that, you know, kind of relationship and family aspect was because I was so focused on my career. And I wish like I could be in this position now at 43 with like 25-year-old eggs, that I could, you know, have many more options around. But yeah, that really resonated with me. But one thing I think you didn't quite make so clear in your story though, is that you were married to a woman. So yeah, that's a different scenario, isn't it? In that's the only option, I suppose, for conceiving babies when you're in a same-sex relationship. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey, I suppose, as a gay woman going through IVF, and what that was like for you, I suppose, emotionally, practically, and from a societal point of view?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, you're right. You know, unfortunately, science isn't advanced yet. But yeah, I mean, I think IVF for a woman, you know, gay or straight, you know, it is complex and it's a really emotional journey. And I can only, you know, speak from my own experience, but as a gay woman, it is hard. You know, financially, it's hard because there's no funding. So, you know, you've got to be prepared for that. And you know,
same for a single woman.
Yeah. And it's not just, you know, it's the IVF, it's all the costs around it as well. You know, the tests, the medication, the additional procedures that you didn't even know that you needed to have. And then it's also, you know, making sure that you're, you know, financially stable enough to be able to fund additional rounds and, you know, of course, take time off work when the baby arrives. You know, there's no second salary. Again, that's, you know, not just being a gay woman, that's being a woman on your own. And, but that's a real thing, having, I've had to make sure that I've got a second stream of income in case I lost my job. As you know, working in tech or CX is really unpredictable, and I need to ensure that I've always got a stream of income should I lose my job. So I retrained as a fitness instructor, and I've got something to fall back on should I lose my job, and that does keep you, awake at night, thinking about the finances. And then you've got, I suppose, big questions like, how are you going to do this? As in, where will you get the sperm? Will it be someone I thought about asking some friends, but then you're always connected. Could you do co-parenting with someone? How would that be? Will you use a non-clinic based donor site? So, something that's a bit more, unofficial, or will it be a sperm bank? But obviously there's lots of costs associated with that. Will it be in the UK? Will it be overseas? How will you choose the sperm? What characteristics are you going to pick? And then you've got to think about all the genetic strains that you need to be aware of. Are there any conditions that you might carry or they might carry? Like, oh my gosh, the whole thing is just a minefield. Like it is, isn't it? I know we've spoken about it. It's pretty intense. And then I guess, you've got actually doing the IVF bit. That's crazy. You've got all the injections in the stomach, the pills, and your hormones are changing, being poked and prodded and having things shoved up you all the time.
Yeah.
It's so emotional. And we were talking at the time, and I remember when I was 4 weeks pregnant and I went to the loo and it was just filled with blood and I thought I'd miscarried, and I was so devastated. And I don't think I've ever cried so much. And
I remember
you're like constantly in this betwixt in between state of like a dream coming true and then it just falling away at the drop of a hat. And I just didn't know that. I didn't know that women still had periods during pregnancy. I genuinely didn't know that. And I think like the whole thing is just like this. It's a roller coaster. But I suppose, again, socially, not just as a gay woman, but, there's other things to think about. Am I being selfish by bringing a child into the world on my own and being over 40? People have got an opinion on that. Is it fair for a child not to know their biological father? How will they feel when they're older? And then you have those opinions of some, who think that a child needs to, I suppose, have a father, and that, having a gay mum or a gay parent is damaging. And that's, that's real. I've heard people say that. I've had people say it to me indirectly. And, those are, hard, I suppose, scenarios to be in, and big questions. And, and this is all before it's all started. And then when you're on the journey, you're asked, where is the father on every form, appointment, people in general, it's all kind of geared up, I think, mainly for heterosexual couples, really. But, it has been joyful. I don't want to it's not all, doom and gloom. And, the joy I found surprisingly is in the community of gay families, but also, single women who I've connected with, who've been on the same journey, and, to see them now with their children who are happy and thriving. And I think that's what's really important. So it's, I'm not going to, gloss over it. It is bloody hard being a single woman, but being a gay woman. But, if you really want something, just go for it. And you've just got to, I suppose, be grounded in your beliefs and your values.
Yeah, I love that. You're doing such an amazing job. I'm so impressed, so proud of you. I was just thinking about the bits that resonated for me. So yeah, financially, it's very expensive, and it is unfair that solo women, same-sex couples aren't given the same access to fertility treatments on the NHS. We all pay the same national insurance. I think there's a few places now, postcodes, where they are supporting gay families and single women, but the single women have to have had something really serious complication, like medically, in order to qualify for that. I said IVF is the only option, but it's not, is it? Because in vitro fertilization is IVF, and that means the removal of the egg, what they call the test tube, but it's actually a petri dish, and the actual conception takes place outside of the body, isn't it? But there is also artificial insemination, or that's going to start giggling now. So many other ways to do it. Sorry to interrupt your listening, but I just wanted to take a moment to tell you a little bit more about Wix. We're the world's first online membership community for women in customer experience. Our mission is clear, and that's to unleash the power of women to lead the future of human-centered business. Working in CX can feel lonely at times. We're often single-handedly trying to change the way organisations think and behave about customers. On our paid platform, you can discover a vibrant tribe of fellow female professionals, find support from knowledgeable peers, learn best practices from experts and practitioners, and be inspired to up your game through leading-edge CX and EX thinking. If you feel like you aren't making enough progress with your CX objectives, are unsure about what your next move looks like, or are struggling to achieve your career ambitions, you're not alone. To learn more about membership, see how women are progressing personally and professionally with the support of the #1 community in CX, you can apply to join us today by visiting www.womenincx.community/membership. I really hope I get to see you there soon. In my experience, I remember like going to choose the donor was actually with my mum. Me and my mum were like shopping basically for a donor on London Sperm Bank, and like getting to choose like the genetics, the characteristics of your like future child. In one way, it was really nice to have my mum with me to do that, but at the same time, what a big decision. What an absolutely big and crazy decision to have to make. And the emotional turmoil, I suppose, are all those questions. I think, especially with how the world is turning right now, like that's, I think, still probably my biggest question is like, is the world going to be a safe place, particularly for women in the next few years? And then the physical side of it, like I wasn't prepared for how physically hard it was going to be. You mentioned the injections, but for me, it was the hormone impact, because I have PMDD anyway. I struggle with my hormones in the luteal phase. I go completely, I'm not the same person for about a week and a half. And when you have IVF, they like hyperstimulate your ovaries to produce multiple follicles, and on a normal cycle you only have like one that matures. And the whole hormone, I know you know this, but for our audience, the whole like kind of hormone cycle is about this like single egg being released, and it kickstarts like a chain of everything else. And the luteal phase with one egg is essentially that follicle receding and the hormones that it produces. But then when I had 30 eggs collected, 30 follicular eruptions, the amount of hormones then that were produced as a result of that for someone with PMDD, like I didn't feel like myself for 3 months afterwards. Not to mention the kind of like physical challenges. I gained 10 kilos during treatment. I was in a lot of pain. I was very borderline in terms of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, OHSS, which can be very dangerous. And it took me months to feel like myself again after that treatment.
God, and you just describing that, I mean, I think you and I were sort of trying to figure it out as we were going along, but we only got this information when we were in the process. And I think that's what I find so surprising, that there's not more information that's sort of widely available or talked about IVF, and actually what you will go through emotionally, and it being a bit more normalized, because even in where I work, there's so many people that have gone through this journey. I meet people and they've gone through that journey. Like, well, how did I not know about this? Why is it not discussed more or supported more? It's really strange.
Yeah, but also like I think the customer journey of the clinics and the customer experience, like they haven't thought about that healthcare journey, and it feels very, very sales oriented. I know I felt very pushed to get like upsold to and like add-ons and like a real lack of transparency, even in like the communication and the all like the form filling and everything. Like I definitely think you and I could take apart that system and put it back together far better, with the interests of women at the heart of it.
I remember telling you, because when I was going in to have my implantations, it's a big day for me, right? And I've paid a lot of money for it, and I was so surprised that when I got to reception, they were like, okay, so if you got your customer number, that's what you're going to be identified with today. So instead of calling me by my name, I was being called a number, and I was just like,
customer 15234.
And you're just,
it's gross, isn't it?
A little room, a little curtain around you. It is surprising, but hey.
And such a like, highly emotional, massive financial investment. You'd think that more of these clinics would be more focused on like of a female-centered experience and designing
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
So thinking about going to like take a skip back into the kind of career side. So
Okay.
before I ask you the next question, I'm going to ask you, what is Agile and what is Scrum, just in case anyone listening doesn't know what that means.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose Agile is, I suppose, a methodology of how many organizations, I suppose, approach their way of working. You may be used to, I suppose, more traditional, very planned ways of working called waterfall. But within Agile, I suppose we're trying to equip organizations to be prepared for change, really. And I suppose when we're working in technology, a lot of the time we are working in the unknown. So teams tend to use Agile as an approach to try and, I suppose, prepare teams to cope with those situations. And Scrum is just one of those frameworks that you can use that sit under the Agile umbrella. And it's got, loads of principles and values that people can follow. So it's kind of a mindset shift as well as, I suppose, a practical, way of working.
And what does a Scrum Master do?
Yeah, so I guess Scrum, as I said, is one of the sort of frameworks you can use to enable agility in your organisation. And I suppose the Scrum Master's role is to work with the teams and the organisation to say, hey, we've got a new way of working. Here are the rules. Here are the guidelines. I'm going to coach you and show you how they are, but you go and play. You go and figure out. I'm not telling you how to code. I'm not telling you what the answers are, but I'm just going to sort of keep reminding you of how to play in this new way, so that you can achieve that, because you're basically working with change. You're trying to shift an organization, how they think, how they approach. And it's not just, most of the time you're working with a very large system. So it's important to have the Scrum Master, because it's not, I think people, sometimes misunderstand the role because they think they're just there to, babysit and facilitate with one team. You're not. You're working with the C-suite. You're working with leaders who are having to shift how they approach from, maybe being more, hierarchical or in their approach to management, and really shift the whole organization. So it's an interesting role. Yes. And it's there's lots of parallels, I think, with this crazy world of IVF.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. I was just wondering, did any of the skills or principles that you mentioned help you manage the uncertainty or decision-making demands around IVF? Would you say that that's helped you in any way?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. So, my role as a coach is essentially, helping organizations to prepare for, expect and respond to change, and, get the teams to sort of practice, new skills, adapt and be able to respond, when they need to. And, essentially that is what IVF is. It's full of unknowns and twists. And, who you are as a woman at the beginning will not be who you are at the end. And you will have to switch and pivot and try new tactics just to get yourself, through the journey and keep moving forward. And, in Agile, we tend not to plan too far ahead. And what I mean by that is, we know what is 6 months ahead, but we only plan in real depth and detail and focus in on the first month. And I suppose the reason behind that is because things change. And so whereas in business, the reality is if you, plan too far ahead, you're just wasting time and money. But in the IVF context, it's the energy and courage. Okay. So, I found that it helped me just to focus on each stage at a time. These next 4 weeks, are about me staying fit and calm while I have my egg collected. Yeah, but you have to take it step by step, or these next 4 weeks I'm just going to focus on my diet, and I need to stay close to home because I've got loads of injections and medications, or like I was saying to you, when I had to do my pregnancy test, it's a big day. I don't really want to take too much responsibility on at work in case I get the answer I don't want. So you get the gist. You have to kind of break it down. And if you think about the whole journey of IVF all at once, it's just too much. And, especially on your own, if you've got no one to soundboard with. And, like we've shared, the times where I would think too far ahead and worry, the anxiety can just be crippling. And decision fatigue as well. It is really real here because you're constantly having to make big decisions. I suppose another one as well, in Agile, we encourage transparency and visualization of work in progress. So, and that's to make sure that, everyone's on the same page and we all know where we're at. And, when we're working in tech, everything is complex. And, a lot of the time, non-tech people don't understand everything. So, IVF is complicated. Every letter, every form, appointment with consultants, it's full of scientific jargon, and they just expect you to know what they're banging on about. And, you just don't most of the time. And, also when you're doing it solo, you're so emotionally invested it's really easy just to forget what you're being told. So I would ask them to draw it out, what are you saying? So I got some clarity around it, but also that, when I went home, I could go back and look at it and, really try and absorb it. And I suppose
you agile coached your doctors.
Yeah, pretty much. But it was though. I remember like saying to you, I was like, "What the hell does that even mean?" I was just like, had to Google everything. I literally even to do with like the female anatomy. I was like, I didn't know that was that. So, and I, you think that would be a specialist topic, but yeah. So there's lots of things that, yeah, it's very complex.
And now little Fox is here, the gorgeous little bundle of joy that he is. Yeah. How are you adjusting to that? Because you said, like being flexible and agile in dealing with change and having to pivot and, as new situations or circumstances crop up. But I suppose like the first few stages of baby development is exactly that, right? And are you 4 months in now? Is it 4 months?
Yeah, he's 4 months now. Yeah.
4 months.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so amazing. Is anything like particularly surprised you?
It's gone so quickly, but I think for me, what's surprising, is just how amazing, I suppose, the female body is, that you've gone through, this whole physical thing. I had a C-section, and then, you've got this life that you're, I've got this little boy that I'm, trying, to bring up, and I'm trying to muddle through as I'm going along, but I'm doing it. And your body enables you to do that. And I think I'm just blown away all the other mothers that I've met that, on a similar journey. I think that's what surprised me so far. And I suppose, obviously, I'm sort of someone that loves a plan, just being able to let go of that and just trying to be more in the moment. I think it's been really magical, really.
Well, you're certainly glowing, and I love all the little pictures that you've been sending me, and all his little Fox outfits and his Fox themed bedroom. Yeah, his Fox themed books.
I know,
it's so cute.
Yeah, I'm gonna but the thing is, in the storybooks, the fox is always the baddie, so I'm trying to find some like pro Fox things so that they're not all like. I think the Animals of Farthingwood, I think Fox was a good positive character there, so I think I need to dig that out for him.
Fantastic Mr. Fox, Roald Dahl. I think he was the main character, wasn't he? Yeah. Fox giving main character energy. Yeah, if anybody else has any idea of books where foxes are the main character and good, yeah, to let Freya know. So in terms of agile, we talk a lot about like your sprints, retros, prioritizing the backlog, and the agile principles that you coach businesses in, and particularly through tech. Are there any that are showing up particularly in your approaches to raising your newborn now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I suppose, if we look at the Agile Manifesto, there's probably two that stand out for me. So we've got responding to change over following a plan. I guess, I suppose for me, I love a plan. As you know, I usually plan out my day every morning and I want to achieve this. But obviously, with a newborn baby, you don't know what they're going to want or need that day. And just, I suppose, just letting go of that and just trying not to, I suppose I suffer a bit from, being a perfectionist as well and wanting to do everything right. And you read all these books saying, oh, they should be doing this, you should be doing that. And it's just like, you know what? I'm just not going to let go of that plan today. He looks like he's having fun with his play mat. Let's just go with that. And I think it's just just I suppose letting go of being too restrictive with a plan and just I suppose seeing where each day takes you. So that's one of them. Another one from the manifesto I suppose is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So here the customer is Fox, and so I suppose it's just how's he feeling, how is he happy, and I'm getting my feedback from him, and I suppose it's just reminding me just to be like in the moment, and I think that's quite special, really. So, there is no right or wrong.
Does he fill out a little survey for you?
I have to get him to. Well, he doesn't need to fill out a survey. He either cries or he laughs. So, it's pretty clear how he's feeling.
Yeah, easy to read emotion in his customer journey.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cute. And would you say that like going through IVF and having Fox and now becoming a solo parent has changed the way you perceive your identity, either as a woman, as a parent, or as a professional in the business world?
Oh, it's a big question there. So impermanence, I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a word that I love. And it's basically the state of not lasting forever or not lasting for a long time. And I suppose in life, whether it be a career, hobbies, a relationship, your role as a partner or a wife or a mother, they will at some point shift. And, to be able to find acceptance and courage, with that ideal. And I think it's that ideal that's really grounded me in this journey. And it has reshaped my sense of identity. I found that, really, really powerful. And I also think, as a woman and a mother and a leader, believing in the art of the possible, okay, that's a strength. And I can, wholeheartedly say that I practice that, and it's this mindset, it will always drive, change and growth, as a mother, but also, in the world of business. So, I take some confidence in that. But, also, so, just going through this whole process, and I think, just talking to you now, just thinking, oh my gosh, what a journey, I can say that, I know myself better, I've gone through some really dark times and I've found ways to get through them and, keep the end goal in mind. And, in those like early weeks, when Fox arrived and I was doing the night feeds, completely alone, just sitting in the dark. And I'm just staring in total awe at this little boy, that's now here. And then, I just think back to all those times that, I'd wished and I dreamed and I prayed for that exact moment. And, it's pretty amazing. And I just think, I am bloody resilient and, I'm surprised at that. So, yeah, I think that's kind of how it's shaped me really, or who I am now, because I am different from who I was at the beginning to who I am now.
Oh, it's amazing. So, Freya, my final question for any other women out there, especially those that are either gay or solo, work in CX or tech, and are considering IVF, what's one thing you wish someone had told you before you started your journey?
Okay, well, you'd already touched upon it at the very beginning, and I think it's, don't wait to get your fertility checked. I think it's something that we always think we've always got tomorrow, but that's not always guaranteed. I think back to when I was at school and we were talking about, sex education, or, we didn't talk about fertility. It's all about, a little bit about the mechanics, or it's all about how not to get pregnant, and then a little bit about periods. But there's nothing around empowering women about taking control of their fertility. And so I think if I had that choice again, I would just get it checked, or get my eggs frozen, because I'm a very healthy person. I put a lot of effort into my fitness and well-being. But just because I'm healthy on the outside, that has no reflection always on what your fertility is. And when you leave it so long, then, that's kind of taken away from you. You don't have to put it in the hands of your partner. It just gives you more choices. And I think what you and I have shared around our careers, having to make that choice, women shouldn't have to make a choice. Just because you're wanting to better yourself in your career does not make you a bad mum because you haven't wanted to get pregnant when you were younger. It's like you're wanting to create a life, a lifestyle. So I think, just get it checked early, and I just say for any gay women out there, don't listen to the naysayers. There's always going to be people who say, no, that's not how things are done. And it's the same, for women working in tech, yes, there is always one way of doing things, but there's always another way of doing something, and just try and take strength in that. Stick with your values and just, go for it.
I love that. And I think my only addition would be take time off if you're going to do this. Don't try and work and do all the treatments at the same time, and be prepared for what can happen afterwards once the egg retrieval's happened. If you're not planning to get pregnant straight away on a fresh cycle, if you're going to freeze, what the consequences hormonally might be. So being able to create sufficient space for you to focus solely on your body doing this massive thing and recovery from it, because I know I tried to go back to work too early, and it was, I had to say, sorry, I can't, I'm just not ready. But I've also seen a lot of other women who are trying to balance the appointments, going for scans, having to nip in and out of work. I think if you can be really transparent with your organization. Obviously I'm my own boss, so it didn't really affect me the same way. But going back to the beginning when you were talking about how much maternity benefits and care came as a decision point in which company you decided to work for, I say, ladies, make sure you check out what their policies around IVF and support around that are as well. And any companies or organisations at leadership level that are listening to this, please consider IVF as part of that maternity journey, in terms of how you set work up to enable women to, if they need to or want to, be able to take the time to do treatments like this and feel supported. Because I'm 100% sure like stress is a huge factor in whether or not rounds are successful, in inverted commas. And we need to recognise that the traditional way of getting pregnant and 2.4 kids and marriage and children isn't something that all women prescribe to or subscribe to.
And just to add on that, you know, I'm incredibly lucky. My sort of, I suppose, people lead HR manager at my organisation, Leanne, she's been absolutely wonderful. She's been through the IVF journey herself, and I didn't have to hide about it. I could talk about it. I could talk about how I was feeling, and you know, they supported me on the clients I was working with, and that made such a difference. Because, like you say, you know, I only had 2 embryos. I've got 2 shots. You've only got 1, and you want to be in the best place and to feel supported and know that that's one. You know, your career is one thing that you can, you know it's okay. It makes a huge difference. So yeah, like you say, if there's any organisations out there who haven't got IVF on their people policies, you know, do, because it makes such a difference.
I love that. I suppose I should probably close before I say goodbye to everybody with like, well, what's my kind of current status update about this embryo that's in the freezer? Because I haven't carried on talking about it on social media. And that is that I'm not sure what I'm going to do or when I'm going to do it. I think part of my reticence, as I mentioned, is what's going on in the world right now. That's terrifying. Part of my reticence is I do only have 1 shot. So at the moment, I do have a real chance that if I decided to go ahead, that I could have a baby. But I don't know how I'd feel if I found out it was no longer an option if it didn't work. And yeah, I guess thirdly, I don't feel ready, but I don't think anyone ever feels ready. But I think like stability wise, I just haven't quite got everything in place that would enable me to confidently have a baby by myself. My parents don't live anywhere near me. I'm 4 hours away. Financially, things aren't amazing. So I'm still kind of working towards how do I set myself up from an environment point of view that I feel like I am in the best possible position to, if I wanted to do it, and rather than taking the risk. But as you've demonstrated today, Freya, I think a lot of it is about taking control of your own destiny, making some really big decisions, no matter what the outcome might be, recognizing that innately you have the resilience within you to, no matter what happens, deal with whatever will crop up, that it will be okay, that you will be okay. And as you said, you know, if it's your dream, whatever that dream is, it's just to relentlessly pursue it and make it happen for yourself. So I'd just like to say thank you so much for being such an inspiring woman in CX and sharing your journey with our podcast listeners today. And yeah, just wishing you all the best for that. You got another 6 months off, is that right?
Yeah.
The next stages of little baby Fox's growth, and I can't wait to give him a proper smoosh.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy that we've got to talk about this subject, and I hope that it inspires some other women, definitely.
Yeah. And yeah, we really scratched the surface because there's so much to talk about. But if any of the listeners want to reach out to you, Freya, where's the best place to connect with you?
Reach out on LinkedIn, please do. I'm more than happy to have a chat. And reach out on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye, Freya. See you all next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Inspiring Women in CX podcast with me, Claire Muscat. If you enjoyed the episode and you don't already, please do drop us a like and subscribe to our channel. The bigger the following, the bigger the impact we can create in our mission to amplify the voices of women working in CX and technology. Well, that's all for now. See you all next time.